Now, historian Martin Sandler presents a collection of President John F. Kennedy's personal correspondences. The letters range from notes sent to his parents from boarding school to secret missives to Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev during the Cold War. This event from the John F. Kennedy Museum in Hyannis, Massachusetts, is just over an hour.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We want to welcome you here to the John F. Kennedy Hyannis Museum. We're very happy to have you here this evening, and we're happy to have C-SPAN with us as well for the author Martin Sandler and Rob Sennett, who's a past chairman of the Board of Trustees of the JFK Hyannis Museum Foundation. My name is Dick Neitz, and I'm happy to have you here with us, and we're looking forward to a wonderful program, and we thank you all again. I would give you a couple of reminders, if you would. Please turn your cell phones off. Since we are being recorded, I understand C-SPAN will broadcast it within the next couple of weeks, maybe on the weekend within a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And if you would, what was the other thing I was supposed to remind you of? Oh, yes. The microphones you see here are not for distribution throughout our museum, but they are for C-SPAN. So if you have a question, don't talk from the back of the room and expect to be heard and on C-SPAN. So we'd like to have you come up.
Don't be intimidated, because we need good questions.
And you can tell the author is very shy and retiring, so it's it should be a lively discussion, and we're looking forward to it. So thank you again for coming.
Yes. And no women, no hotel room keys thrown up here.
That's right.
Okay.
Keep them tucked in your pocket. I would extend my welcome and my greetings to those that were just offered by Dick. And as he said, my name is Rob Sennett. The gentleman on my right is Martin W. Sandler. And Marty, welcome.
Thank you.
The prolific Mr. Sandler has written and published more books than his age. And I think there are very few
42.
people who could do that.
Yes, right.
Two of those have been nominated for Pulitzer Prizes. His work ranges rather broadly from examining President Lincoln through photographs to the traumatic events of the Dust Bowl of the 30s, and then on to, of all people, the Beatles in the 60s. He, Marty, is justifiably proud of his 6 books in the Library of Congress, the American History series for young people. Marty has also won 5 Emmy Awards for writing and producing, a former high school teacher who has taught American history at UMass Amherst and also Smith College. This New Bedford native lives here on Cape Cod in Cotuit with his wife Carol. Welcome. Marty, firstly, I must compliment you on the incredible variety of letters that you have selected. There are some just remarkable gems.
Right.
Jill Abramson, who is executive director of the New York Times, wrote 10 days ago that an estimated 40,000 books have been published since the president's death. So, given the broad scope of the subjects you have tackled, why President Kennedy and why now?
Well, you know, it was my conviction before I started this project that one could probably tell more about John F. Kennedy, the man, John F. Kennedy, the president, and the incredibly turbulent times in which he lived through letters, through the letters that he received from every walk of life and the letters that he answered, then all the books. I don't care if it's 40,000 or 50,000. I mean, you know, thank God I didn't try to write this book 10 years from now, because it would be the emails of President Kennedy, you know, or the sound bites of President, or it would be the Twitters of Barack Obama. It's a lost art. I don't know, people in the audience, when the last time anybody here wrote a real letter. You know, words are my business, and I haven't written a letter in 8 years. So that the thing that's extraordinary is that they're such human documents, and they're on every single subject imaginable, during a time when this man woke up every morning and something was blowing up in Berlin, and something was blowing up in Cuba, and the entire South was blowing up in his face, and he kept hearing little hints of this place called Vietnam. This is one man. He's not even 46 years old, and he's supposed to deal with this every day, and he's getting all these letters writing in, and some of them are confronting him. What is the most important thing, I think, about the letters is that they force him to state his position on certain cases where he might be able to try to avoid it. So that the first real articulation of why he believes a Catholic should be president comes after he is barraged by letters saying, you think I'm going to vote for you? You think I'm going to let the Pope tell me what I should be doing? The first real explanation of why he sends advisors into Vietnam comes from when he gets what I think is one of the most extraordinary letters ever written. He gets a letter from a woman named Bobby Lou Pendergrass, who says, Dear Mr. President, I am a great admirer of yours. My oldest brother was killed in World War II. My second oldest brother was killed in Korea. We know they were heroes. We are so proud of them. We know why they were there, and we know what they died for. Now we just got this telegram that my youngest brother just killed in a place called Vietnam. Where the hell is Vietnam, and why the hell are we there? And so it may well be the first Vietnam protest letter. When you buy the book, you'll see it. The answer that Kennedy gives is the clearest articulation he ever gave of why he sent advisors in and why we had to have a stance. And then, if you read through the book, you know, I love what ifs. I have to tell you that. You may get a word in before you're done.
I have a few questions here that I was hoping I might be able to ask you.
Can I go on with this, and then you go ahead. You go.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
The letters are archived at the library in Boston, yes?
Yes.
How many and how many did you page through in preparation for the book?
Okay. The letters are housed in the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Columbia Point. They've done an incredible job. You know, John F. Kennedy himself had an incredible sense not only of history, but of his place in history. And so from the time they started coming in, before there was a presidential library, they were archived and they were kept. Yet, when I do the kind of books that I do, so much of it depends on the research. It's 90% research. You know, after doing 90 books, if after I've done my research, if I do my research right, if I can't write it well, I better throw my pen away, you know. Mm-hmm. But I got very lucky. You know, in research, you got to be good. I wrote this brilliant book called The Resolute. And what happened is that I was doing another book, and I saw these little hints that there once was a great British man-of-war that on its own sailed 1,200 miles before a sea captain discovered it. And I said, oh my God, it's a ghost ship. I got to do a book on that. And I started researching. I couldn't find anything about it. And then one day I'm giving the keynote address at the Celebrity Series at the Mystic Seaport, and people come up to me as I'm signing autographs, and a man comes up and says, hi, I'm Bill Peterson, and I am the curator of the Mystic Seaport. And I say, nice to know you. You never heard about a ship called the Resolute, did you? And he said, I've been keeping a scrapbook on her for 12 years. Wow. And I said, thank God he didn't want to write a book. And you know, and so we went, and that just started it. Get this one for being lucky. The people in this, where we all live, you'll appreciate this. It's one thing, all right, so of course I started out by saying, I'm not going to be able to read 3 million letters. But I know enough intelligent people, I know enough informed people, particularly at the library, that they can lead me to where the topics are. I know I'm going to have to discuss Kennedy and his Catholicism. I'm going to have to discuss the civil rights issues. I'm going to have to blah, blah, blah. So I want these people to point me to where are the letters in these sections. I ain't not going to read 600,000 in each section, but I'm going to read 5, 6, 7,000. I did television for a long time, and every time one of our programs came out, I said, oh God, if they only knew what was on the cutting room floor. I mean, you're going to read this book and you're going to like it, I guarantee you. But if you only knew was what I couldn't get in. So let's hope it's a bestseller and I can do volume 2.
There you go.
Yeah, but part of this whole thing was that how I got extraordinarily lucky was, it was one thing to go up there and they open at 8:30 in the library and they close at 4:30. So I want to be there at 8:30. I want to 5 days a week that they're open, and I want to leave at 4:30. But I live on Cape Cod. So in order to get there at 8:30, I got to be on the Southeast Expressway in rush hour. Yeah, in rush hour. And then I get there. And now I say, could I have boxes 27 through 64? And, you know, 2 hours later, they come up, and I read them, and I get a few letters. And when the day is done, I get my reward. I get to go back on the Southeast Expressway going the other way in rush hour. And I say, it's going to take me 64 years to do this book because I'm not going to fudge it and I'm not going to, and talk about being lucky. About 4 or 5 weeks after I got going, they digitalized all the letters. Or they had digitalized them and they put it up on there. So I still had to read 700,000 letters and I still had to spend $1 million on ink. Thank God for print preview. And
But you're doing it from the comfort of your home office.
Oh, that's exactly right. And I'm doing it from my own home, and I'm able to get at them, and I'm getting... now, not all the letters in this book, not all the letters I read came from the Kennedy Library. I mean, there are incredible letters that people have never seen from Robert Frost. I mean, and you wouldn't believe the convoluted route. You know, I've always believed that research is, if you do it right, it's a wonderful detective hunt, and I love to do it. And this convoluted hunt, I found the letter that Robert Frost wrote to Kennedy after Kennedy appointed him a secret ambassador, a special ambassador to Russia, in which he reports back on his meetings with Khrushchev. I found that at the Vermont Council of the Humanities. Right. What the hell is it doing there? But I found the most wonderful letter. You know, Kennedy's... You better ask me another question. I'll go
I'm
first.
about to.
Okay. Tell me if I'm being too shy.
You've organized the letters chronologically from one of JFK's earliest, which is a facsimile copy of his note to his parents, asking for a raise in his allowance from 40 cents to 70 cents because he was going to be a Boy Scout. And
Can I be obnoxious and read that to this audience?
Please.
Okay. I guarantee you're going to hate me by the time I'm through. No, you're not. He writes to his father and he says, "Dear Sir Joseph Kennedy, my recent allowance is 40 cents. This is the first letter John Kennedy ever wrote. This I use for airplanes and other playthings of childhood. But now I am a scout and I put away my childish things. Before I would spend 20 cents of my 40 cents allowance, and in 5 minutes I would have empty pockets and nothing to gain and 20 cents to lose. When I am a scout, I have to buy canteens, knapsacks, blankets, searchlights, ponchos, things that will last for years. And I can always use it, while I can't use a chocolate marshmallow sundae with vanilla ice cream. And so I put in my plea for a raise of 30 cents for me to buy scout things and pay my own way around anymore." And he signs it, Finney, John Fitzgerald Francis Kennedy. And to this day, and I asked members of the Kennedy family of this, to this day, no one knows why he threw the word Francis in. They thought his father thought that St. Francis was his favorite, so maybe that'd help get the raise.
Confirmation.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
He wrote another one while at Choate, did the president, asking whether he might be the godfather to what turned out to be the youngest and finest boy, and that was Teddy. Tell us about how you decided to do them chronologically and then group them.
Well, I'm not... Briefly. I really didn't decide to do them chronologically. I decided to do them topically, and and it didn't take any genius because it's a very natural division, I think, to make it easier on the reader. I did the early years, and then I did the road to the White House, and then I did what Kennedy at one point said after he got defeated for the vice presidential nomination, which happened to be the luckiest thing in the world because if he had gotten nominated, he got killed in the election. They asked him, "Will you run for the vice president again?" And he said, "No, I will run for the presidency because that's where the president is the man at the center." And he always thought the president was the man at the center of everything. He is. So I titled that "Man at the Center" with the letters that have to do with his presidency. And then, I mean, these are not, brilliant titles. I titled the next section "A World in Crisis." I titled the final section that was my most creative title. I called it "A Triumph of Will." People ask me, I just got interviewed on the radio and in the newspaper before I got here, and they asked me the same questions the BBC asked me yesterday and CBS asked me last week. What surprises were there? And we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, as we go along. If he ever gets a word in.
Did you guys pack a dinner?
But anyway, I didn't find any of the letters from Marilyn saying it was great last night. I did not find it. Although I did find letters with his affair with a married woman who was a friend of Adolf Hitler's, and Edgar Hoover was about to nail him for. How's that for? But I did not set out, and I did not write a sensational book. The surprises are incredible enough, And one of the things that surprised is that if you read the letters, and if you take them seriously, if you take it seriously, you all know that he had the back problems, and they were made worse with PT 109 experience, and he had the rights of the Catholic Church given to him at least 3 different times. But what is not as well known, he writes a letter when he's 35 years old saying to one of his friends, well, the doctors have told me I won't live past 45, so I better make the best of it. He had Addison's disease, and he had it so badly that it is really problematic whether he would have lived through a second term. And it was a surprise to me to see this kind of documentation that was there. So that, and it's wonderful when you find that. And it's great if you don't go looking for the sensational. Now, I don't know what's being held back in the Kennedy papers. I have no idea what's still there that we haven't seen. But what we do find, what I was able to find, is revealing enough.
Thank you.
Okay.
JFK was the first television president, and his use of that medium was central and critical to his success both as a candidate and a president. He was groomed for this, as literally were all of his siblings, by his father from his movie-making days in Hollywood. Yet you write that above all, President Kennedy, was a reader and a writer. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, the man could read 1,200 words a minute. He really could. I mean, that's documented. I mean, he was brilliant. He truly was brilliant. The reviews, I keep all of my great reviews tattooed to my arms and my chest. And the early reviews are wonderful. Please may they keep. The one negative thing that somebody from the BBC told me about, he said, but don't worry about it. The guy wrote 400 great things, and then there's one little minor point. He says, you're probably being too complimentary about Kennedy. And I said, I plead guilty. Because it's very hard to go through all these letters and to see how this man inspired young people, how he inspired our age people, how he inspired the world, how he operated in pain every single day of his life and never let it affect his presidency negatively, how he sat there with the world blowing up in 9 different ways and stayed with it. I mean, there's only one person in the whole world who can write better than me about Kennedy. That was William Manchester. I don't even believe that. William Manchester was his friend, and William Manchester was probably the most articulate of any Kennedy writer, and he just said it very simply. He just said that his death was a tragedy, but his life was a triumph. And so it's very hard to be... Now, Kennedy was lucky too. I'm not the only lucky person. If he had lived, and there was no unspoken, unwritten law amongst the reporters that we don't report on the private life of the president, they'd have crucified him. He made Bill Clinton look like a choir boy. He really did. But there's no evidence in those letters, and there's certainly no evidence in what got reported. Oh, they knew. I mean, And so I don't even think I answered your question, which was, I'm back to it. He was movie star he was movie star handsome. He truly was. I remember as a young man playing baseball in Milford, Massachusetts, and he came to the field. He's about to, right? And, you know, I looked at him and said, that may be the handsomest man I've ever met or seen. I mean, he was movie star handsome. And the best thing of all is I talked to so many people doing this book, and one woman told me, I can't remember. Anyway, she told me that she went to an early rally where there was Jack and Teddy and Bobby. And she looked up, and she turned to her mother and she said, all those teeth, all that hair, you know. But you had to be there. Until Kennedy, presidents were afraid of press conferences. They were afraid of candid photography. You see very little candid photographs. Forget Millard Fillmore and those guys. Of Harry Truman, even. They all had to be arranged and posed. Not Kennedy. Man, he loved it. And then with television, he found his medium. The press conferences were works of art. How many press conferences do our modern presidents have? They avoid them like the plague because they're going to be asked Kennedy had more press conferences in his first year than all the 10 presidents before him, and the hottest ticket on town was to get in there and see a press conference, and they lined up along the street trying to get in. And he used that to his advantage. He knew.
Moving right along.
Yes.
From our vantage point, 50 years on, and 2 decades since the Berlin Wall fell, the most significant exchange of letters in my evaluation of it was really between the President and Premier Khrushchev of the Soviet Union, particularly in terms of the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and the Cuban Missile Crisis. So can you give us a sense of what that time was like and more importantly, how those two got along and how they each, in different ways, managed their staffs?
That may be the most important. Your questions are terrific. I shouldn't be kidding you because and we never met before this on these questions. We did not. Okay. If there ever was a verification of what my thesis for this book was, meaning you can tell more from the letters than from anything else, it's the Khrushchev-Kennedy letters. It's very, very interesting. One of the great surprises to me was that I'm old enough, and there are other people in this room old enough to remember that their impression of Khrushchev was a guy who sat at the UN, took off his shoe, and banged the table. Khrushchev and Kennedy, well, they really brutalized each other in some of these letters. They really staked their entire reputation and their future on winning over each other. They were both determined that their people's way of life would win. And yet, Khrushchev starts the letter off to Kennedy and says, "At present, I am on the shore of the Black Sea. When they write in the press that Khrushchev is resting on the Black Sea, it may be said that this is correct and at the same time incorrect. This is indeed a wonderful place." And then he goes on to say, it's correct because it's such a wonderful place and I'm relaxing. But I'm not relaxing. I can't get what we have to go through out of my daily, minutely life. And Kennedy writes back to them in a letter that I've lost. Oh, no. Dear Mr. Chairman, I regret that the press of events has made it impossible to reply earlier. I have brought your letter here with me to Cape Cod for a weekend in which I can devote all the time necessary to give it the answer it deserves. My family has had a home here overlooking the Atlantic for many years. My father and brothers own homes here near my own, and my children always have a large group of cousins for company, so this is an ideal place. Now, that's how they introduce, and then they get into it. Let me just tell you this. You can tell more and more accurately about that incredible period of the Cuban Missile Crisis when the world came this close to exploding. I mean, just if you get the book, and when you get the book, you can see Kennedy's letters asking some of his relatives, have you built your bomb shelter yet? Asking James Galbraith to look at the government brochures and critique whether or not these are the right kind of instructions for bomb shelters. You can tell more from these letters because what happens is that early on, when this crisis, almost right after Kennedy is shown the pictures of the missiles in Cuba, he and Khrushchev make a secret agreement. They will write to each other every day until either this is resolved or the world blows up. They use that language almost. They will write these letters. They will tell each other what each other is thinking, what each other is planning, what they think the other is planning. And they will do it in secret, and they will put them in secret diplomatic pouches, and they will be delivered through the embassies, and not one member of the press will ever see them, so they won't screw it up, and they will not blow it up out of proportion. You know, I'm a historian, so there were times when I wrote about the Declaration of Independence of the Constitution. The United States Constitution would still be being written, if they had let the press in to see. That was one of the first things that Jefferson and the boys did. Keep the damn press out of here. Sorry. keep the damn press out of here. All they're going to do is make mountains out of molehills or molehills out of mountains. We know what we were trying to do, and that's what they did. And the other thing is, you know, at first his youth really hurt him, because Khrushchev savaged him. You'll see in the letters. He savaged him. He brutalized him in Vienna, their first meeting. And that's why Khrushchev thought he could get away. I mean, talk about chutzpah, putting missiles 90 miles away from Florida. But he had so brutalized Kennedy. He felt Kennedy was such a weakling. He figured, well, he learned a different Kennedy after that. Through the letters, he learned that there was a different Kennedy. But Kennedy also was wise enough that when they were coming down to maybe, I guess, was it Dean Rusk? Somebody said the other fellow just blinked. Yeah. When Kennedy saw him start to blink, he knew something. He knew something at that young age. Okay, I may win this. Give him space to save his face. He's got his own people to report back to. And so he said, he knew Khrushchev was going to ask that Kennedy remove the missiles in Turkey. Those were important missiles.
Yep.
He was prepared to give them up in a minute because it was the trade-off. But the most important thing, it's through those letters that you see it. And I don't understand why I've been hobnobbing with the BBC over this book the last couple of days. And they ran my initial brilliant interview. And, the sad thing is I really believe this. But anyway, they ran the initial interview, and then like 3 other divisions of the BBC got all taken up with one aspect of it. They asked me about a letter that Kennedy writes to Khrushchev, which Kennedy is thanking him for the gift of Pushinka. And what he says in the letter is, I thank you so much for it. I am so pleased that Pushinka had an easier trip here than her mother did originally. Well, her mother was on the first space vehicle that the Russians put up. Somehow the British public is going to fall in love with that. The damn dog. So anyway, so you never know what's going to resonate. I mean, here I'm talking about all these learned, important letters, and they're focusing on a dog. Maybe that's why we won the revolution.
Yes, popular culture. One of the exchanges during JFK's campaign for the presidency, which I found intriguing, was with FDR's widow, Eleanor. She, at the time, topped all polls in America as the most influential woman. And she additionally had a widely syndicated column, newspaper column. Mm-hmm. And she posited in one of those that his father, the ambassador, was quoted as saying he would, quote, spend any amount of money, close quote, to ensure that his son became the first Roman Catholic president. He challenged her, but he did so gingerly. Much, you reveal, was done in that case with letters rather than a meeting or phone calls.
Absolutely.
And the difference can be?
These are great questions. They really, truly are. That probably is the most intriguing exchange of letters in the whole book, because there's about 20 of them. And what happened is that she actually went on a national television program, the collegiate something or other, and she blatantly said, I have had information that Joseph Kennedy Sr. is attempting to buy this election. Now, you have to understand that she was such a supporter of Adlai Stevenson. Adlai Stevenson was her guy, and so she so wanted him to win. She thought Kennedy was much too young for this job. Well, so did Harry Truman. So did a lot of people. And in fact, in this exchange, she often opens it up by saying, "My dear boy." Woo. It's an incredible, incredible exchange of letters because you see she won't back down. She's not just the most influential woman in America. She's the most powerful woman in the world, Eleanor Roosevelt. And he knows he's not going to get her to stand up and say, this all takes place when he's a senator, and it's in 58 and 59, and then when he's about to run for president. He knows he's not going to get her to stand up, I want him, but he can't afford, he simply can't afford to have her oppose him. And he certainly can't have her publicly say, your daddy's trying to buy your office, buy the presidency for you. And so they go back and forth, and she gives in a little, not enough for him. He won't give in. Until in the end, she does as close a retraction as she possibly ever could, which is amazing. But during this time, I couldn't get it into the book except to brilliantly introduce it in my writing, but I could not use a letter because there is no letter. But during this time, the press picks this up because it's Eleanor. And so now the rumor really spreads that Joe Kennedy's trying to buy this election. Kennedy then gets a gig. It's the most important gig he's had so far as a young senator. He is asked to give a major talk and answer questions at the National Press Club. That's big news in those days. Big news. Or a big event. So he steps up, and it's Kennedy, and he knows what he's going to do, and he knows he's prepared to do it. So he says, I know what you're going to ask me. Go ahead. And the first question comes up about, is your father? He says, well, it's very interesting you should ask that. He's at a podium, so they can't see what's on the lectern. Takes out a blank piece of paper, puts it on the lectern, says, it's interesting you asked that. He said, because I just got I got a telegram from my dad this morning that you might be interested in. Can I read it to you? And they all, oh, yes. And he says, Dear John, I will be very happy to buy you the presidential election, but I will be damned if I'll pay for a landslide. And you know, it's Kennedy. It's John Kennedy. And he won over a lot with wit. But this exchange of letters that was, you know what, that's the exchange of letters that sold the book to the publisher. You know, I mean, I knew I was going to be able to sell it.
I'll be your agent next time.
Well, this one, you know, it just did. The book is going to do well, I'm sure, and the reviews are terrific. And honest to God, I hate to say anything modest, but I will. It's not my writing. I mean, yeah, I wrote the introductions and I wrote all that, but it's the topic. I mean, can you imagine no one has ever done that? Yeah. And it is so time, you know, and among all these, you picked out the right one, the exchange with Eleanor Roosevelt. It's interesting also how he wins her over, and then the last letter he gets from her, which is later in the book, she writes thanking him for nominating her for a Nobel Prize. Yeah. So they come the full circle, which is just terrific.
One of the real jewels within Marty's book is correspondence between the president and youngsters. One I particularly enjoyed was a letter from a 6th grader in Salem, Oregon.
Walter Apley.
Let me finish the question. About a straw poll which was taken in his classroom, and then the appointment by his teacher of campaign managers. Mm-hmm. So would you tell us about that, and then the president's response?
I thought you'd never ask. You know what? I thought I was giving a speech instead of this. And so I wrote out an outline, not that I'd use it. Everything I was going to discuss, you've got them all down there.
No collusion.
And we've never met each other, have we?
No, we haven't.
And this woman's going to take a lie detector test. Okay. This is, you know, when he was running in 58, he starts in 58. There's so many letters by kids get written. And, you know, of course, they're charming. I mean, as I said, there are also letters that are so perceptive that are amazing. But one of the letters, I'm going to get to this one in a minute, but one of the ones I really love is after he gets all these letters about why we want you for president and all that, he I could not find the letter this kid sent, but I found the letter he sent to this kid thanking this youngster. He said, "Dear Marie, I want to thank you so much and praise you so much for the courage you showed last week when your class dismissed the whole class to go down to the auditorium and watch Mr. Nixon on television, and you refused to go."
The campaign manager.
Walter Apley writes him a letter and says, "Dear Mr. President, I just want you to know what I've been doing. We took a vote, a preliminary vote in my class of all the candidates, and here's how it came out. Stevenson 2, Humphrey 1, Kennedy 1, Nixon 4, blah, 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 blah. I was not happy with that, and I asked for a revote. Meanwhile, I did some campaigning. Here's how it came out now. Kennedy 14, Nixon 13, everybody else 0. I then decided that wasn't enough. We should have a runoff between Nixon and Kennedy. This is how it came out. Kennedy 24, Nixon 20. You know, I'm making up, I mean, those are about right, but I haven't got the proportion right. I just want you to know it's a joy to be your campaign manager." And Kennedy writes back, he just wrote back thanking him, saying, "You have no idea what a comfort it is for me to have a campaign manager in Indiana like Walter Apley."
So while JFK did not live to see the lunar landing, he did send that seemingly impossible goal in motion, and he did see John Glenn's orbital flight. What letters struck you about the space program?
There are about 3 or 4 that really are really incredible. One, I never realized until I did the research and everything, and found letters that it was chutzpah enough for a man as President of the United States, knowing we didn't even have a rocket that could go as far as Fall River, to say that to say that by the end of the decade we're going to be on the moon. Holy smoke! But when they got going and they started, there's an exchange. There's a long exchange. In the library, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of letters between Kennedy and, oh, don't forget his name.
Jim Webb.
Jim Webb, thank you. James Webb, the head of NASA. And in several of the letters, Kennedy starts pushing Webb. Can we possibly get on the moon by 67? The hell was 69. Can we get on there by 67? And Webb is telling Kennedy, we probably could do it if we get rid of this program, science, science instruction and this. Webb is pushing and pushing and pushing that when Kennedy goes out to give speeches on the space program, talk about the scientific knowledge that's going to be gained. Talk about all of the things we're going to learn about the world and the universe and how that's going to be applied. And he goes on and on and on. And finally, and this is actually in a video clip in the Kennedy Library in Boston. Finally, Kennedy looks at him and says to Webb, he says, "Alan, are you ever going to get it through your head? I don't give a damn about science. I just want to beat the Russians." And that's what he wanted. Yep. That's what that whole program was about. And it's revealed in the letters, which is wonderful. I mean, it's really revealed in the letters. There's also a letter from him to Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, in which he appoints Johnson ahead of the day-by-day operations, and he says to him, what can we get done by this month? What can we get done by this month? I mean, he was really on top, but he staked his reputation on. I mean, how the hell he ever thought that would happen?
That appointment also means we had mission control in Houston.
That's right.
If I may move to another topic for a moment. Thank you. While you include correspondence with many of the usual stalwarts of the civil rights era, 2 were striking to me. One was Jackie Robinson, and the other was Josephine Baker. Mm-hmm. The one is a colorful, entertaining dancer, and the other, and singer, and the other, of course, the icon who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Were they effective lobbyists?
Yes, they were. I mean, it's the whole, what is revealed through the letters and through history is the fact that Kennedy is a political animal. And you can never, the man's president of the United States, he's got to run again in 1964. He's not all, with all the polls showing him doing very well, it's still no certainty. I mean, that's why he goes to Dallas. He is so concerned that all his advisors told him, stay out of there. They're nutcakes down there. Adlai Stevenson just got spit on last month down there. Do not go. But he did not want to take the risk that he would not win Texas in the next election. He needed those electoral votes. He knows he's walking a tightrope on civil rights. In his heart, of course, he's for human rights. In his heart, he bleeds for the African Americans. But on the other hand, if he starts taking a big positive stand, he's going to lose the South, and he can't afford it. So he asks them to wait. And the letters that come in from Philip Randolph, from James Farmer, from Lewis, from all these black leaders are the most vituperative letters in the book. We'll be damned if we'll wait. Yeah, it's easy for you to sit in a Hyannis port on your yacht and tell us to wait while our kids are getting blown up. And he waits and he waits and he waits. He does a couple of very intelligent things. When Martin Luther King gets jailed, he calls Coretta King and offers his sympathy. He doesn't do anything about it, but and that alone gets lots and lots of black votes. But then he gets to a point where it goes beyond looking for votes. And it's when, and the letters show it, when George Wallace is standing in that doorway and he's defying the law of the land. And Ross Barnett, and that letter is even more revealing than any correspondence with Ross Barnett in Mississippi with James Meredith, is standing in the doorway and saying, you will not come in because you're black. Something snaps in Kennedy. He writes a hastily proposal. He goes on television and radio in front of the entire American people, and he tells them he's going to send to Congress the most wide-sweeping civil rights legislation there ever was. And Martin Luther King, who has been attacking him in these telegrams, says that's the most important address this country has ever had. Kennedy finishes the address, turns to one of his aides, and says, will you please tell me why sometimes we do something that's so important and it takes us so damn long to do it when we know it's right? So in a direct answer to your question, Jackie Robinson became a very important movement. There's one letter that's really important in what he says, in which he criticizes Kennedy for what he thinks is kowtowing to the Southern governors. Guess what? He is. He's kowtowing them because he wants their state's votes. But there is a letter. It's the last letter I think one of the last letters I used in the civil rights section, in which Jackie Robinson writes to Kennedy the day after Medgar is shot down in front of his wife and kids in his own driveway. And it's just, I won't even try to paraphrase it, it's just so poignant. And then he ends it by saying, are you going to stop protecting Dr. King? You don't think he's going to get it if you don't protect him? Talk about prophecy. So it's but again, you couldn't get that I couldn't write that brilliantly as I write. Irresistibly as I write. I couldn't write that and have the same effect as having Medgar Evers say that to him. Yeah. So I think that's the importance of the book.
Yeah. You write that JFK regarded drive and energy, or in his language, vigor, along with courage, as the two qualities he most admired. Mm-hmm. Yet you think and state that it's his unwavering sense of duty which really most defines him. Yeah. What letters speak to that?
There are letters where he asks, he writes like 10 letters, I didn't use all 10, begging to get sent to the South Pacific. Now there's an ulterior thing there, I'll go into it too, but begging to get into it. He has as I said earlier, he has an incredible sense of his place in history. I started to say before, I'll get it, I'll do this now. As a historian, I love the what if question. What if the Civil War was won by the South? When I wrote the book, The Resolute, I couldn't keep writing it without thinking all the time, these guys, for 35 years, they're looking for John Franklin, the world's greatest explorer, who has gone missing, and they can't find a trace of him in the Arctic. And I had to say to myself, What if they had GPS? What if they had a cell phone? You know, they got GPS, they turn it on, that obnoxious woman comes on and says, take a left at the walrus, a right at the iceberg, there he is. Or they get on the cell phone and they say, John, where the hell are you after 33 years, you know? To get serious, what if Kennedy had lived? What would he have done? Who did I talk to? Some political historian who knows a hell of a lot more than I do. Said, Marty, there is no greater political question, historical question out there remaining in the world ever than what would Kennedy have done about Vietnam. We don't really, I've got hints in the book because that's as far as I could get through the letters. But what would have happened? You know, what if? What if he hadn't gone to Dallas? What if a lot of things? So that I love the letters that raise questions as well as answer them and keep you wondering. But I just you know, every one of the reviewers who have questioned me, I did a thing for CBS Sunday Morning, and the woman, as intelligent and as informed as she is brilliant. And you know, she was raising the same kind of questions as to, you know, what is in there that what mysteries are there that and that's, you know, it drives you crazy, but it's also the joy of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple of more questions, then we will turn it over to you guys and the microphone. So begin to formulate your questions if you would. Leonard Lyons, who was a columnist for the New York Post, wrote a letter to the president in which he quoted prices for presidential autographs.
Right.
And it's a wonderful sequence that shows Kennedy's cleverness and his wit. Would you share that exchange?
Yeah, and it is. You picked the best example, perhaps, of his wit in an exchange of letters. Lyons, who he knew Lyons, and Lyons was the writer for the New York Post, and the columnist, probably the most popular columnist in America. He writes a letter that says, Dear Jack, I was walking by an autograph shop on Fifth Avenue, and George Washington's autograph is going for this, and Abraham Lincoln's going for this, and your autograph's going for this. And so Kennedy writes back to him, and Lyons makes a suggestion and says to him, why don't you stop signing stuff so the price of your autograph will go up? So Kennedy writes back to him, writes this very warm letter, and at the end he says, you know, give my regards to your wife, give me the children, all that. He says, you'll notice I haven't signed this. I hope the damn thing goes up. And it goes on like that, and it just keeps going back and forth. So that he took every opportunity, and I'm sure it was such an incredible relief. One of the things, are you going to ask me anything about Harold Macmillan?
No, but why don't you tell us something about the Prime Minister of Great Britain?
The reason I'm saying that is it ties in with this. There were some relationships that formed during the Kennedy presidency that were really, because the Lyons one brings it to mind. Kennedy found, not only in England, but particularly in Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister, a father figure, a true father figure. And he also found his greatest ally. Kennedy's greatest desire, career-wise, was to get a nuclear test ban treaty. It was the greatest. When you read the letters, I never would have believed it until I saw it all in the letters. I always would have thought saving the world from nuclear holocaust ain't bad. But he really believed getting a definitive test ban treaty was the greatest triumph of all. And it was with the help of Harold Macmillan. And the relationship, when you look at all these letters, and I use quite a bit of them, also because I want the book to sell. I want the British edition to sell. But anyway, when you look at all of these letters, about halfway through, it's the only time this happens in his whole presidency, he isn't saying, Dear Prime Minister, or Dear Mr. Prime Minister, he's saying, Dear Friend. And it's wonderful how you see this whole thing. And then in the pictures between that you see of the two of them, it's a terrific bond. It's very warm. And you know, the man who died, the way he died, you look for the warm things too. And that was a very... The other thing that's interesting is I never realized it's almost impossible to get anybody, no matter who they were or who they are, named an honorary honorary citizen of the United States. They did it for Lafayette with good reason. And now Kennedy goes on a crusade to get Winston Churchill named an honorary citizen, and it's not easy. It has to be approved by Congress, and we know how easy that is. It has to get approved by the Supreme Court. It has to go through all this kind of stuff. He stays with it. And the letters, exchange of letters between him and Churchill, I mean, you know. On his worst day, Churchill could write better than any of us, and I got to tell you, the exchange of letters between Churchill and him, Churchill expresses his gratitude when it finally happens in a way that I've never, ever read anybody express gratitude. It's not surprising. It's Winston Churchill. So there are some very warm exchanges, along with some pretty tough stuff. Yeah.
Speaking of photographs, as you did a minute ago, referring to Harold Macmillan, some of your books have been subtitles Through the Lens.
I did a whole Through the Lens series.
Talk to me about how you selected the photographs which accompany the letters in your book.
This one? Oh.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, the Through the Lens series was based on, you know, I did a book on Lincoln Through the Lens because the thesis was that Lincoln was among the first generation of human beings ever to be photographed. And the photographs tell you more than words can about, because he learned how to use them to his advantage. And then I did Kennedy Through the Lens for young adults because he becomes, in his time, and there's great parallels. This is not that kind of book, but we did want to have folios of photographs. And what we really try to do is just have them go the way the book does. Just have almost every topic have at least one. And you know, there's a very surprising series of letters between Kennedy and David Ben-Gurion, not only the premier of Israel, but the founder of Israel, in which they're very angry letters, in which Kennedy is saying to Ben-Gurion, I'm killing myself trying to get a nuclear test ban treaty. I've even got de Gaulle on board, and that's impossible. And you keep testing in Dimona. You've got to stop. And Ben-Gurion, thank you, in so many words says, it's easy for you to say sitting in Hyannis port. I'm sitting with the Arabs all around me, and you want me to give up nuclear testing. And Kennedy threatens him. And he threatens him in such a way that Ben-Gurion resigns. And I will tell you that I found articles, not in any crackpot publications, but in very sophisticated publications saying, forget Lyndon Johnson, forget the CIA, forget Fidel Castro. The Mossad killed Kennedy because they were so upset over what he did to Ben-Gurion. So, you know, we got a few little bombshells we throw in there, not proven.
Yes,
yeah,
I hear you. Okay, your turn, please. Questions for Marty?
Please.
Please approach the microphone there.
You're going to be on C-SPAN.
That's right.
Anybody? Oh, here comes somebody. Once we get a couple of brave souls.
Breaking the ice. And
yeah, I'm sorry you have to do this, but that's so that they can pick it up.
I'll break the ice.
This is Wendy Northcross.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, welcome back. Thank you. You're such a joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, where were you on November 22nd, 1963?
Oh,
What do you remember?
I didn't plant that question, did I? Well, first of all, I was too young. I wasn't born. I was the headmaster of the worst private school in New England, maybe in the United States. They brought me in to save the Stowe Preparatory School in Stowe, Vermont. I didn't save it, but I stayed 2 years like an idiot. This was a school that a member of the United States Olympic ski team and an Olympic skier founded. He knew this much about education, but he figured if he took all of these kids that the courts had ruled out of their states because they were such trouble. Remember the book, Mommy Dearest? I had the two Crawford girls. Okay? Anyway, and they were two of the nicest ones. Anyway, all of a sudden, here it comes. I got 96 hysterical teenagers. Hysterical. And I've got them all in the auditorium, Wendy, and I'm trying to calm them. The tears are coming down my eyes. This is going to surprise you, this answer. I played a lot of professional sports. I never, ever, I got into fights, but that was in sports. I have never hit another human being except that day. Everybody's there. We're all in tears, and the news is worse and worse. And now we're seeing Jackie with the blood, and we're crying, and we're getting laughter from the back of the room. I had a teacher from the Netherlands who thought we were all being so silly, getting this emotional. I went up and I told him to stop, and he wouldn't, so I clocked him in my professional manner. But so that's. But you know, it's really interesting. We all remember. Those of us who were there, we all remember. There are certain, you know, we remember when man landed on the moon, and we sure in hell remember 9/11, where we were on 9/11. There are all these different events, and they define us in many ways. That's a great question.
They do. We here at the museum will be leading the commemoration on the 22nd of that sad anniversary.
That's wonderful.
Other questions, please? Mr. Neitz.
The back channel aspect of the letters between Khrushchev and Kennedy always fascinated me. And this summer, the Hyannis Museum was hosted at the home of JFK and Jackie in Hyannisport. And Bobby Kennedy kind of regaled us in the stories of the president writing those letters while he was in Hyannisport and going back and forth with the president. Is that really well known, the back channel correspondence?
Not
because
at all.
I had never heard of it
And
before.
I hadn't either. No.
And I was really impressed that you know, Bobby was really enthralled with the process as a teenager at the time and the secrecy of it all. So I wondered how
wonderful at that age to be that enthralled. No, the letters don't reveal where he's writing most of them from. That's why I picked out that letter where he specifically talks. He specifically writes to Khrushchev saying, "I'm here." And now there are other letters where he writes to Khrushchev. They get this. It's crazy. They get this warm, fuzzies, and then in the next letter they said, "We're going to bury you." The Khrushchev thing is amazing to me because, for example, in all of those letters, and you know, I had to do an enormous editing job on the Kennedy-Khrushchev letters, not just Cuban Missile Crisis, but Berlin and all the way down the line. Many of them are 35 pages long. Many of them are 40 pages long. So in order to get the gist in there and not bore the reader, but I'm going to tell you, of all the letters between Kennedy and Khrushchev, and boy, I read them all, the greatest line, the most telling line, the most memorable line is the one in which one of them says to the other, this is during the Cuban Missile Crisis, "If we don't solve this, and if we don't solve it now, the living will envy the dead."
Yeah.
That's Khrushchev. That's not Kennedy.
Yeah.
It's Khrushchev. Well, one of his aides, but it's Khrushchev. So there are so many surprises, but that's a very good point. And no, I don't know where Khrushchev was writing the letters from. It amazes you to think that all right, so when you got the Cuban Missile Crisis, you better pay attention to it or we all may die. But in the rest of the 3.5 years that Kennedy is there, for example, and he's dealing with so many things. Forget the ceremonial things. I mean, there are letters in there. Every once in a while, I throw a letter in just to show you that what the scope of what this guy, like the letter from the guy in Florida trying to sell Kennedy an estate, which would be a perfect place to retire to, and I'll give you a break because you're the President of the United States, you know? I mean, there's... A good realtor. Yeah. Oh, my God, is he in your heart? I know. Yeah, exactly. So that, but that's a very good point. And, of course, they never stopped working. They just never did. I use a quote in one of my introductions where Kennedy said, thank God Kennedy is like Lincoln. He's so quotable. I mean, there's so many quotes. What he said when he took the office, when he was sworn in, he had no idea, he says, the scope of the burdens, the magnitude of the burdens that he'd be facing. And yet he finds time to write these letters, not just trying to put out a fire, but every imaginable kind that, And then there's, the ones you might expect. I mean, if you want to break your heart, there are all these letters like that. It becomes a form letter after he writes the first one, but like to all of the families of the men who went down with the thresher,
Yeah.
you know, or the ones that start getting killed as advisors in Vietnam, and so forth. You have a question?
Yeah, my name is Bill Monaco, and I'm from Newark, Delaware, and I just happened to be passing by, and I'm really glad that.
Oh, I'm
I was
glad
here.
you're here.
Welcome.
Oh my God, what a refreshing from these bozos from the Cape.
What I wanted to ask you is that in my travils, I've been to different parts of the world, and I don't know of a president who has had such a tremendous global impact
Good for you.
on whole populations of people, and who, tying on to the first question, associated his loss as much as we did when it happened. So
That's a lovely comment. Yes, there has never been a president who has been so respected overseas by people because he inspired everybody. And I have the exchange of letters in the book between Willy Brandt. Kennedy made it, Willy Brandt, the mayor of Berlin, and Kennedy. It's a wonderful progression of things because when that Kennedy was determined, and he made it clear that unless there was a colossal catastrophe, he wasn't going to plunge the world into war over Berlin. He just wasn't going to do it. Cuba and missiles is something else again. And now the Berlin Wall goes up. And Willy Brandt writes him a letter and says, you're going to just sit there? You're going to let us be divided like this? You're going to let our freedoms be taken? And Kennedy writes a very brilliant, albeit wish-washy, non-committal letter in which he's telling him that we will increase the troops, we will go into deep negotiations, we will blah, blah, blah. But he ain't going to war. It's very clear. And Willy Brandt is not amused. And then Kennedy goes to the Berlin Wall. And he stands up there. And in maybe his greatest speech of all is Ich ein Berliner speech. And there is no way to measure the impact of that speech around the world. Kennedy, there's no way to measure the impact on him. He finishes his speech, he turns to Bobby and he says, we will never have a better day in our lives than this one. You know? Thank God the microphones pick it up. You know? That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, and to what both CBS and the BBC, and I'm sure our friends at C-SPAN would ask me, is, you know, is his impact, is he still regarded that way? You know, polls are polls, but man, do I read polls. And every poll I read, right up until a week ago, top 5, top 3 presidents of the United States, still John F. Kennedy, you know?
Terrific.
Yeah.
Another question, please.
Hey, Marty. Marina Q. Just an observation, but Kennedy, from all that you've said and everything that I've read, he really was a man standing for peace. And he's a military man. And he takes over from Eisenhower. Eisenhower's, in one of his last speeches, he warns everybody about beware of the military-industrial complex.
Right.
Yeah, what is your take on, I mean, Eisenhower standing for peace, giving that as his last speech, and Kennedy taking up this mantle for peace, two military heroes. Yeah. Were they in conversation, or what do you make of it? I mean, because it's just so evident about the peace.
Well, there's a lot of...
Thank you.
No, thank you. There are a lot of letters in the book between the presidents. Presidents have always written to presidents. Most of the letters, one of the greatest things about our democracy, and we find a lot of things wrong with it, but one of the greatest things is how peacefully the torch gets passed. That still startles a lot of people around the world. Yeah. People were startled when Kennedy was killed and Johnson took over, and it went so peacefully in the midst of this incredible violence. That's one of the things we can be the proudest of. The earliest letter between Kennedy and Eisenhower, in the book is one in which it may have been the first letter, certainly among the first letters that Kennedy wrote in that Oval Office, when he wrote to Eisenhower and thanked him for making the transition. So it was one of the smoothest transitions. These guys did not see eye to eye, certainly on Berlin and so forth. But, you know, all right, I have to play the historian just for a minute. You're talking about two men who are great men in our history. And we historians we always ask the same question. Do you judge the man? What's more important, the man or his times? Does the man make the times, or does the time make the man? And if a guy lives in a time, if he's a president of a country, president of the United States, during a time when nothing's going on to challenge him, can he be great? So, I put it to you. If Millard Fillmore had been president of the United States during the Civil War, would we be going to the Millard Fillmore Memorial in Washington? Would we be going through the Millard Fillmore Tunnel? I don't know. But one of the things, of course, that makes Kennedy great is he was challenged more than any other president. And he stood up. He met the challenges. There's a lot of people still criticize, but he met the challenges. Franklin Roosevelt, the Republicans hated him, that man in the White House, but nobody could, this guy with another man with a golden spoon, he met the challenges. He stood up to him. An unlikely man to save this country from poverty, a very unlikely man. Eisenhower has always been an enigma to me, because Eisenhower, I have a feeling that if Eisenhower had 4 or 8 years of incredibly troubled time, I think he would have stood up. I really do. Just as nobody expected Harry Truman to stand up, Yep. And so just it's very interesting. They don't mind if they have breakfast here. One of the things I find fascinating in the book is that Kennedy gets a letter from one of his top advisors was Arthur Schlesinger Jr. Arthur Schlesinger Sr.'s father, the great professor of history at Harvard, writes to him and says that he's about to launch a project in which he's going to ask learned people all over the country to rank the 10 greatest presidents. Would you, Mr. President, please, I know how busy you are, but would you do it? And Kennedy writes back and says, I've thought of your letter a lot. And he said, it's not a question of time. He says, but if you had asked me that a year, 2 years before I became president, I would have answered you in 20 minutes. He says, now that I see what it takes, give me a couple of years. That's one of the first things I'll do when I get out.
Yeah,
So it's a very revealing, revealing. So thank you for your question.
Another question?
Hello.
Another
Be
one.
careful, she's a reporter.
As a journalist, I always have another question.
Of course.
But this is a very simple one. It's about process. I was just thinking that all those letters between Khrushchev and Kennedy, were they all written by hand?
Oh, good question.
They were. Or were some of these things typed out?
They were typed. There's a lot of... When you buy this remarkable book, you'll see that what we've included are illustrations of some of the handwritten letters. I mean, one of the great ones is from Harry Truman, in which he's writing to praise, early on, to praise Kennedy, and says, well, it looks like the Republic rats are at it again. He said, what I'm noticing, what I hope you've noticed is that I got a lot of praise for giving them hell. Well, you do the same damn thing. Give them hell. And that's handwritten, so it's lovely. Some of the letters from that letter from Walter Apley, in which he's talking about Nixon Fork, and that's all handwritten. It's wonderful. One of the most interesting things and I didn't do this, my publisher found this. We have on facing pages, we have one of the letters from Kennedy, from Khrushchev to Kennedy in Russian, and then the translation that was on the next page that was handled. So yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. But I love the handwritten ones. We printed out the handwritten. It was very hard. First of all, it would take 20 pages to do it. Secondly, it's very hard to read them sometimes.
Dick, please, another question.
And it's maybe a good thing to wrap it up, just to get your impressions. This year we've seen Letters to Jackie, the documentary that'll be out this month on the Discovery Channel, and your book on the letters of JFK. And one of the archivists from the JFK Presidential Library in Boston commented to us in one of her visits here that the difference in the presidencies and the correspondence of presidents over the years has changed so much, and that in the future there will be so many fewer letters for historians to look
question
at.
about it. No
And I wondered if you could just kind of talk about the impact of that in the future and how much of what's being written today is actually going to be resurrected
Well,
for the future.
it's sad. It's a loss. That's all I can say. It's a loss because you're not going to have presidents down the line writing 40-page letters because they get through. I mean, they Skype. And by the time that our grandkids are going, they're going to talk into their watch and they'll have a meeting instantly. I mean, who knows what it's going to be. What we can say for sure is that you don't get in emails what you get in these letters that are in this book or in that library. And you don't get on Twitter what you get there. Plus, I've written I wrote 4 histories of photography. And we went to digital, we lost a lot. We made it a lot easier. But the great photographers don't work in digital because they don't say, I'll take 600 pictures and maybe one will be great. They concentrate on getting those 2 or 3 great pictures. Same thing in I think, I never thought of that. That's brilliant. You just thought of that now.
Once again.
It never ends.
Several things in conclusion. Firstly, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thanks to our viewers on C-SPAN. For those of you at the museum, and this is the Marty line, copies of the book are available for purchase and autograph as provided by our friends in Osterville at Books by the Sea, and they're in that direction. Marty, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. You are wonderful.